Hello, I'm Mickey Granot, and this is another session of Nextera Academy Introduction to Theory of Constraints. This time we will be focusing on project management, the theory of constraints way, primarily on the single project environment. Um, so a bit of definitions to make sure that we all talk about the same things when we use terminology. So project, as it is defined by the Project Management Institute, is a temporary endeavor undertaken to create a unique product or service. I think the important parts of this definition are the term temporary and the term unique, that indicate that projects are operational tasks being executed in an environment where high uncertainty is unavoidable. Project management is the application of knowledge, skills, tools, and techniques to project activities to meet the project requirements, scope, time, and budget. Again, definition as is commonly accepted in the world of project management. There are two major project environments. We will have another session on the multiple project environment. This one is on a single project environment, typified by all resources that are executing the tasks in the project are fully dedicated to the project for the duration they are supposed to be working in the project. While in multiple project environment, the resources are shared across multiple projects simultaneously. As mentioned, this will be the content of the next session. Just as a clarity about the project management practice in terms of tasks that are called project management, it starts with the scope definitions, go to a process of project planning, what are the project tasks, who are the resources that will execute it, how much time and effort is required to execute each one of the tasks, understanding the interdependencies of sequence between the tasks, creating a project network to schedule those tasks, converting the schedule into a Gantt chart that shows us the schedule against the timeline, identification of the critical path, which is setting the duration of the project as a whole, doing modifications if the project is too long or too expensive, trying to bring it into the constraints of time and budget, and finally freezing the plan so it will serve as a baseline for monitoring progress later. Then project management moves into project execution. That includes the progress reporting by the resources, analysis of the status according to this reporting, taking intervention corrective actions when required, and reporting the progress to those that need the information. When the project ends, it needs to be closed, so there is a process of project closing. Some common practices in project management. Planning mostly results with a very detailed project plan. Every task is identified and planned, has specific resource that is assigned to it, as an estimated duration, as a planned start and a finish date. Every resource participating in a project gets a list of the tasks that they need to execute in the project, and the tasks will have, of course, the information as presented earlier of duration, start and end, planned dates. When the project starts, the execution and starts being executed, every resource manager will monitor the execution of the task under his responsibility and against the plan, and will take intervention actions when required, specifically when tasks do not or cannot be executed as planned. The project manager will follow up with the resource managers to get a picture of the project as a whole, and will take his own interventions when he believes or has reason to believe that the interventions taken by the resource managers are insufficient or inefficient. At the end of the day, the interesting thing to look at is how are the projects performing. This is a graph as presented by a survey done by the Project Management Institute. And as you can see, about 20% of the projects, 15 to 20% of the projects deemed to be totally failing. Only about 30% of the projects are about 30% of the projects have failed to meet their budget. About 40 to 50% of the project have failed to deliver to the full scope, and only about 55% of the projects are being completed on time. And in spite of that, there are about 65% of the projects that are being claimed to have achieved their business goals. There's a bit of misalignment over here, but the interesting data is that most of the projects continuously for a very long period of time, probably since the beginning of times, fail to complete with their full scope on time and within budget, in spite of the fact that the knowledge and tools for project management have been advancing tremendously over the years. The project objective is to deliver a defined scope within a defined period of time and budget. There's a question that comes to mind. The common practice is to focus on the project tasks. It is all about the tasks. Even the PMI definition, I'll go back, of project management is the application of knowledge, skill, tools, and techniques to project activities. So project management is very much focused on project tasks. And the question is, what is more important, to complete a task on time and within budget, or to complete a project on time or within budget? And what is the effect of that fact that project management is focused on tasks and not focused on the project? To understand that, we need to bring into the consideration also the fact that projects are executed in a high level of uncertainty. Remember, they're temporary and unique, meaning this past experience is less relevant as every time we are doing something new. So every time there will be a significant level of uncertainty. This uncertainty is no other way to be expressed in real life other than events that will prevent tasks from being executed as planned. So we are focusing on tasks, however, unavoidably tasks, at least some of them, and not in a negligible manner, will not be able to be executed as planned. We need to bring into consideration that people do behave in accordance to how they are measured. And then we have to ask ourselves, under these conditions, what type of behaviors would we expect people to have in an environment where they are being measured, evaluated, and even incentivized by their ability to complete their tasks as they planned it. So it starts with the fact that when a project is being planned, the resources or the resource managers are asked to provide their estimated duration for every task. Experienced people know that it is a common event that tasks cannot be executed as planned. They take longer than planned, and they are measured on task execution duration. So naturally, people, when asked how much time they need to complete a task, will have some level of safety added into their duration estimate. Not necessarily something they are totally aware of, but it is common for them to believe that the duration they provided is a duration that is likely to be possible. So they would not provide a duration estimate that they totally believe has very little probability of success. In reality, though, not every task will meet Murphy, and not every task that meets Murphy is necessarily negatively affected by that. Sometimes events can enable a task to be executed faster and cheaper. As we know that task durations have safeties, and we know not all tasks are being hit, some of the tasks are positively being hit, it must be that we will see in real life a non-negligible part of the project tasks being completed much faster than planned. But when you look at project environment, it is not common to see that, and the question is why? And why? It is because of how people behave in such an environment. There are two phenomena that happens automatically when we, people, add safety to our estimates. The first one is work expense to fill all available time. It is not common for us to report that we completed the task much earlier than the time that we have asked for, specifically because it is not the last task we are doing in the project or the last task we are doing in the company, and the future will come, and we want to protect the future. So we want to make sure that next time when I ask for X days for a task, nobody will tell me that as last time I did it much faster, why am I asking for so much more time? The second one is called the student syndrome, that says that as long as we think that there is enough time, everything else becomes more important. And commonly, if we have some level of safety in our task estimate, we do believe there is time. So it is common that we do not start a project as early as possible, as we do not feel the stress yet. The result of these two phenomena is that safeties are wasted. The first one ensures that if a task can complete earlier and bring this safety towards the next task's uncertainty, this is rarely happening because people rarely complete the task before the duration they have asked for. And the second one, say that if we do not start as early as possible, when we could have started the task, and we delay the start because we believe we have enough time, if Murphy does hit us, then the probability of late completion significantly increases. And this is all a result of the futile attempt to focus the project management effort, both in planning and more so in execution, on tasks. The common practice of highly detailed planning adds fuel to the burning fire because it actually leads to plans that are more accurate than the level of uncertainty in reality, therefore forces the project management practice of replanning and replanning and replanning as the plan becomes irrelevant a minute after it is prepared. Now let's apply the theory of constraints focusing process on projects. The first step is to identify the constraint. It is understood that the constraint of a project is the longest path of dependent tasks, and normally we are using in project management the critical path. However, the critical path only considers sequence dependency, but these are not the only dependencies. There are also resource dependencies. If there are two tasks that can be executed in parallel by the same resource, and we have only one resource, it creates a de facto dependency between them. The resource cannot execute both of them simultaneously. We have to execute one and then the other. This is called the resource dependency. Due to the fact that the resource dependencies are as relevant as sequence dependencies, in theory of constraints, we have defined the critical chain. It is the longest path of dependent tasks, no matter what the cause of dependency is. So, hence the name critical chain project management. Now that we know what the constraint is and we have identified, the second part is how to exploit the constraint. To exploit the constraint is to understand that what is important is to complete the project on time, not the tasks on time. Safety is absolutely mandatory and a necessary element in order to complete the project successfully. Uncertainty is part of life. However, protecting tasks is irrelevant. So what we need to do is to remove the safeties out of the task and concentrate only part of it at the end of the critical chain, protecting the project completion, or if you would like, protecting any contractual milestone. This buffer placed at the end of the critical chain is called the project buffer, and it has to be 1/3 of the duration of the tasks that feeds into the project buffer. So the buffer needs to be visible in the right place and in the right size. It cannot be too small and it should not be too big. The result is that the project plan becomes much shorter, at least 25% shorter than the original plan. Then we have to subordinate the rest. as projects are not made only from a critical chain, but from other chains that feed into the critical chain, into integration tasks, we will repeat the same exercise on all the feeding chains, remove the safeties from the task, collect the safeties, trash some of the safety, put 1/3 of the feeding chain duration as a feeding buffer between the feeding chain and the integration task on the critical chain. This will protect the critical chain from variation and execution in the feeding chains that can be absorbed in the feeding buffer, and thus keep the focus of the project on the critical chain continuously. Having a plan which is not too detailed will enable us to keep the plan exactly the same for the duration of the project. Whether the project is a 3 months project or a 3 years project, it will not have any difference. Then we can go into execution, and a couple of changes around here. First of all, what resources are reporting is the progress report. Commonly, reports are done to according to the end value idea, which means resources are reporting percentage they have completed. It is irrelevant because the fact that we finish 10% of the task in 2 days doesn't mean that 90% of the task will take another 18. So what we are asking resources in theory of constraints is to report their updated estimate to completion every day as long as the task is being executed. This information is reported to the system, and if it is longer or shorter than the plan, it will affect the buffer connected at the end. The buffer will either be penetrated, consumed by the delays, or be refilled with time if a task can be completed earlier. Using the buffer in a 3-color coding, green, yellow, and red, to identify to what level of the buffer we have penetrated, or in other words, how much of the safety at the end of the relevant path is already consumed, provides everyone in the project with a clear set of priorities and a total alignment to the project goal. Complete the project on time, not the task. It also significantly incentivizes collaboration because resources can see if there is a problem in another place, and they can support other tasks or other resources to expedite tasks that are penetrating deeper into respective buffers. And when intervention is taken, there is no need to replan, because if the intervention is effective, the next report will affect the buffer. It will be refilled with time, and it will move from red zone to yellow zone, and will show that we were effective in dealing with the disturbance. The project as a whole is controlled through a fever chart that looks something like that, where we compare the percentage of completion of the critical chain as a function of percentage of consumption of the project buffer. So through this chart, we can see if we are not only consuming the buffer, but if we are not consuming it too fast, so that we will run into the risk of completing the project too late, in spite of the fact that we might be in green or yellow. When applying critical chain project management, we achieve commonly at least 25 and up to 50% project duration reduction, and we can bring the projects to be 95% or more completed within time and within budget, or actually faster than the time and within the budget. So, to summarize, project management is not about the tasks, it is about the project. We cannot ignore the fact that uncertainty exists. Buffers are critical to success. Most project plans commonly do not have any buffer inserted in them, at least not visibly. Buffers must be visible, must be sufficient, and must be in the right place. Locating buffer just before the completion or before any contractual milestone, and just before any integration point into the critical path, this is the right place to put it. Having the buffer at least at 1/3 of the path duration makes the buffer sufficient. Reporting estimate duration left and task completions allows accurate identification of the need to intervene and the priorities to intervene. Because if I have 2 tasks one penetrating into one feeding buffer, one into another feeding buffer, one is red, one is green. I know what the priority is. If I have two tasks, one penetrating into the project buffer, one into a feeding buffer, irrespective of the color, the critical chain will always get a higher priority. And the result is projects are completed faster, with full scope, and within budget. And wasn't that all the idea of project management? Thank you for being with us today. We hope you learned something, and we look forward to your feedback.